so happy to see you all joining us tonight. For those of you who are joining us again from our last lecture, we are so happy to have you back. And for those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome. I am so glad you're here with us tonight. My name is Bee Redfield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chaco Culture Conservancy. So, on behalf of our board and our partners at the National Park Service, one of whom is here with us tonight, we thank you so much for taking the time this evening to join us and for showing up and caring about places like Chaco and Aztec. It truly means so much to all of us. So, for those of you who may be newer to us, Chaco Culture Conservancy is the official nonprofit partner or friends group supporting both Chaco Culture National Historic Park and Aztec Ruins National Monument. Um, so, our role is to support these parks and to help fill critical gaps through education, community connection, and funding for priority needs as identified by the parks. So before I dive in, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping notes and then we'll get to the good stuff. We will be taking questions throughout the talk this evening, just like we did last time. We'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So feel free to add those questions in the Q&A as they come up for you, and Denise and I will address them later. And if you're still waiting to hear back from those questions you had for Paul Reed, he was under the weather, but he just talked to me last night. Let me know that he is getting those to us very soon. So I will be sending those out shortly, as soon as I get them. All right. And then one other thing I did want to note about tonight's discussion before we get started. As many of you know, working with federal agencies comes with specific requirements for review of communications. So in keeping with those requirements, tonight's presentation has already been reviewed and approved by the Department of the Interior. Because of that, our focus this evening is on specifically our parks, Chaco and Aztec, including things like current conditions of the parks, priorities of the parks, and the work that's been happening on the ground both last year and what's coming up in 2026. So we may be somewhat limited in our ability to address other things beyond that go beyond specifically our parks, like broader National Park Service policies, administrative priorities, federal agency matters outside of that scope. So we really appreciate your understanding that. We just want to ensure we're sharing as much as we responsibly can while still kind of staying within those approved talking points. So just wanted to let you all know that when it comes to your Q&As that you submit. And with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. I might be a little bit biased, but this is definitely my favorite National Park Superintendent in the whole entire world. And I can say that with authority. The current superintendent also of my two parks, Chaco and Aztec, Denise Robertson. So Denise has worked with the National Park Service for more than 27 years and serving in parks across the country, both in urban and rural settings. She studied natural resources management and studio art with an emphasis on planning, interpretation, and community engagement. So that background continues to really inform her thoughtful, people-centered approach to the stewardship of our parks. For the past 7 years, Denise has served as a superintendent of Chaco and Aztec and the Chaco and Aztec Museum and Archives program, which is down at University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. In this role, here comes my cat just on time. In this role, she carries an immense responsibility for caring for some of the most culturally and historically significant landscapes in the country, while honoring the deep and ongoing connections Indigenous communities have to these sacred places. So Denise really brings that rare combination of long-term experience and leadership and the care for people in place that we need, so badly need in this amazing place of New Mexico, where so many different cultures and communities and perspectives come together. So we're so thankful for her taking some time out of her incredibly busy schedule tonight to tell us a little bit about our parks. And with that, I turn it over to you, Denise. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Bee. I feel immensely humbled. So thank you for that amazing introduction. Today, I put on the uniform at about 6 in the morning, and I still have the uniform on. So it'll be hopefully a great hour with everybody. I'm 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 crazily surprised at how many folks we have on the call tonight. So thank you for taking the time to learn about more about Chaco culture and Aztec ruins. And B asked me to put together a bio, which I did this morning, and I was like counting on my fingers. And I recognized that I'd been working in national parks for right now exactly like more than 34 years. And I will not forget the first day working at the Awani Hotel in Yosemite. I worked as a maid, and I remember looking out this big bay window in this fancy hotel room, and it was snowing, and the snowflakes were like the size of potato chips. And I was like, how did I get this lucky? Like, how did I get this lucky? And today I'm at another park in New Mexico. I'm helping out a couple different parks in New Mexico. And I walked to the visitor center and I looked up at the canyon and I thought, how did I get so lucky? Like the dream job. And I was lucky enough to get it. From being a maid to being a superintendent, like spending 34 years of my life in national parks has been like best job on earth. So, super grateful for the Conservancy for having me here today. Super grateful for all of you who have taken out your time to spend with us tonight. So, tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think are some really amazing accomplishments that we have had over 2025 and also pivot to the things that we're going to be working on in 2026. We are busy, and these national parks are strong. And I think that what makes us strong is the foundations in which we are built upon. And that is literally the beautiful structures that we protect. So I serve as the superintendent, like you heard for B, for a couple of very significant national parks. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about some LIDAR work that we've done. If you're not familiar with LIDAR, that's literally like measuring with light in real time and space. And what we've been able to observe by doing that work and what we've been able to track over time. I'm going to talk to you about some trails management programs that we've been improving. I'm going to talk to you about some Aztec Black pottery projects, one specific research project. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our tribal partnerships and our relationships that we continue to grow and build upon. After I do that, I'm going to pivot to 2026, which is today, and talk to you a little bit about the things that are on our horizon. And once I get done with that, that should be pretty quick. We're going to go into Q&A. So I'm really excited about that. I chose not to put together a PowerPoint presentation tonight because I really felt like once I start putting images up on the screen, then I spend a fair amount of time explaining the images. And sometimes it's just nicer to be able to talk about the work that we've done. So I chose that approach kind of purposefully so that we could just talk together. And so I'm going to go ahead and start out with one of the pivotal projects that has been going on at Chaco Culture National Historical Park for well over 5 years now. And that is the LIDAR survey and archaeological recording at Pueblo del Arroyo. And Pueblo del Arroyo is one of the more significant great houses within Chaco Canyon and Chaco Culture National Historical Park. But like its name says, it's along an arroyo, which makes it extremely vulnerable to changes in the water. And while the National Park Service has worked over time to try to divert that wash, nature always has a way of winning. And so that wash just continues to erode into the bankside in which Pueblo del Arroyo sits on top. So I would say about 5 years ago, actually, with Chaco Culture Conservancy, we were able to purchase a 3D LIDAR unit that allowed us to collect images. And it took us, I would say, about a year to learn how to use the software. And then we had to do a fair House unit. And we've been doing since I would say probably 2022 now. And we've gotten really good at it. So what the Conservancy allows us to do by supporting us through philanthropy is it allows us to augment the work that we could already do. So we have staff members who help manage these projects like the LIDAR project, but those staff are busy doing a variety of things. They're also helping to monitor research. They're helping to go out and make sure that those researchers are doing what they need to be doing, and helping the National Park Service do that. They're also helping to supervise and manage sometimes the preservation crews that keep the structures standing and strong. And then they do a fair amount of documentation themselves and research. So you're going to hear about some of that tonight too. And so with that, with the funding that Chaco Culture Conservancy provided to the National Park Service, we were able to learn the software, and then we were able to work with another company to do the LiDAR surveys for us. So at Pueblo del Arroyo, last year we did 5 rooms. This year we did 7 rooms. And it seems like you're just taking pictures, so that should be pretty fast. But it actually takes a fair amount of time to do LiDAR imaging because the quality of those images is literally it's a centimeter. Like that's how accurate this type of monitoring is. If you're not familiar with LiDAR, it's referred to as light detecting and ranging in 3-dimension. It's also with GPS, so it's real space and time. No longer are we looking at documents that were recorded in the past and tracking the difference between those documents. This is real space and time. And while we still reference those documents because they are a wealth of knowledge, now we can take those historical documents and compare them with these 3D modeling and make sure that we've got accurate information. So this year we were able to add on to those 5 rooms. We did an additional 7. What that work entails is that the crew has to come in and actually clean out those spaces so that the 3D modeling machine can actually do that modeling. And then it has to take those super, super detailed images, which take hours upon hours to do. So 36 images were taken on these 7 different rooms. And then the contractor actually takes those images because they're all very complex and separate. Then the researcher, the contractor has to edit out things like snow or people that walked by or animals that might have wandered by. And that person actually takes and stitches those images together. And that's what makes them 3-dimensional on the landscape. So then what do we do with them? First of all, we store them, which ends up being incredible data over time. If you're familiar with Chaco Culture National Historical Park, we're well over 100 years old, and we've been doing preservation on these great house units for well over 100 years. So we have a legacy of knowledge, and now this just adds to that legacy. So then we have these 3-dimensional images, and the contractor actually goes in and documents on top of the images what is the status of them. So is there a crack in the wall? Is there bowing in the wall? Can you take a look at the mortar that is between those stones and be able to determine when we think that those repairs were made? And that's where that history comes in, that 100-year legacy of preservation history really comes in. We're able to take those documents and actually reference them now on these 3-dimensional images in real time and space and have that data to be able to help us in what we need to do as far as preservation moving forward. So that is an incredible project that we've been working on with the Conservancy, and we would not be where we're at today without the financial support of the Conservancy to be able to do that work. Our archaeologists in the park oversee this project on sometimes a daily, weekly basis. These reports are developed by another company that we work with, and then that information is transferred to the National Park Service. The National Park Service and that company work together to make sure that the information that we're receiving is accurate. and is in the format that we need to receive. And then it becomes the National Park Service's responsibility to make sure that we are storing that data appropriately. So that is a phenomenal project that we continue to work on moving into the future, and hold off because there's more to come with the LiDAR work to come, and the software and the equipment that was purchased on behalf of Chaco Culture Conservancy. So that's one of the big projects that was accomplished in 2025. The second project that I wanted to touch upon that we're moving towards completing for 2025 is something that doesn't feel like it's super fancy when it comes to a visitor perspective, but it is. And that includes the housing project that's going on at Chaco Culture National Historical Park as well. So if you've been to Chaco before, you know that there are several folks that live in the park. We have a series of duplexes, we have a series of apartments, and then we have these 4 historical houses along the cliffside, and we refer to those as the Mission 66 houses. And if you're curious to learn more about those Mission 66 houses, it just so happens that we added a brand new page on our webpage where you can go and learn about the history of those Mission 66 houses. But it just so happened they were built in 1955 and 1966. And the National Park Service refers to them as Mission 66 houses because we were celebrating 100 years of being a country. And so it was time for the National Park Service to beautify, just like we are today, with the national beautification of celebrating the 250th year anniversary. And so this was within that same vein where national parks fancied up all over the country, and these houses were created to really sustain workforce to celebrate 100 years of our country. These houses are lovely, and if I could keep them forever and ever, I would, but it just so happens that they ended up in a rockfall zone. And over time, park management, we tracked out when the stones fell and where they fell, and they got a little too close for comfort when it came to families living in those houses. So a project was developed to actually replace those 4 houses. And I entered the park in 2018, and I said, those are really lovely houses. Is there any way that we could move them across the street? So we went through a full-fledged analysis to see if we could move them across the street, but that was going to be, it just wasn't going to work. And so we've been working on, for the last 2 to 3 years, plans to be able to demolish those houses, but historically track them. All the LiDAR has been done on those houses, so we have 3D modeling of every one of those Mission 66 houses, in which there are 4. And then we did designs. We worked with our tribal partners to make sure that where we were planning on building additional housing was going to be appropriate. And we are to the phase this fiscal year where we've received the funding to actually move into the construction phase. We understood that hopefully construction was going to start at the beginning of October, but based on the lapse in appropriations and some other things, we're still on hold with that. And some folks will say, like, park housing really isn't that fancy, but I will tell you that park housing is critical to a visitor experience. For us in the National Park Service, especially out at Chaco, that's your home, that's where you live, and we want to make sure that our employees are comfortable and safe and have the facilities that they need to be able to do their job at their level best. And so building this housing will be able to give us the capacity to hire more staff and to be able to have appropriate housing for those individuals. One of the things that we were able to do that we were super proud about is that we were able to maintain 1 3-bedroom house. So we're going to have a series of duplexes and a series of 1-bedroom apartments, and we will have 1 3-bedroom house in hopes that someday when a superintendent decides that they want their family or perhaps parents, whoever they might be taking care of, move to Chaco, they can do that and they can have their whole family with them during that period of time. So as you travel out to Chaco in the next year or two, you're going to see a fair amount of construction. And this is just one of those projects that really helps our park stay strong by ensuring that our staff have good places to live while they're working there. The third project that I wanted to talk to you about tonight that I'm very proud about is the trails program that we have both at Chaco and at Aztec Ruins. Between both of the parks, we have about 35 miles of trails. Most of those trails are at Chaco Culture National Historical Park, which is really a visitor's way of experiencing the park. I grew up hiking, and that's still my favorite thing to do is to go out on a trail. I feel like I'm the only person on earth, and that's the way in which I connect best with the resource. So it's my favorite. So we were able to bring on a trail specialist who put together an amazing trails management plan. And that trails management plan includes things like regular annual maintenance, but also includes maybe ideas about future trails that we would want to see in the parks, maybe discontinuing some trails that might not be in the best locations today. So, really analyzing what our trails program could look like in the future. And then that trail specialist was actually able to improve some of the trails, mostly at Chaco. So that individual worked on what was called the Weatherall Trail, and they cleaned out some weeds and vegetation. They widened the trail. They fixed some of the check dams and the culverts in that trail so that it became more of a safe and friendly experience for visitors who were traveling from the Weatherall Cemetery to Pueblo Bonito. The other project that they have on the horizon is to build an accessibility trail that goes to Pueblo del Arroyo. We talked a little bit about that site with LIDAR, and we feel like that would be a great site for mobility challenged folks so that they could take a wheelchair into the Great House and have that Great House experience. We have all the supplies, and now we're just looking to put together a crew for this summer to be able to finish that project. And then there are more trails projects on the horizon, which I'll talk about when I get to 2026. The last topic that I really wanted to bring up that I am very proud about is our tribal partnership work that we do with 26 federally recognized tribes here in New Mexico, but in other states as well. And we do that work in a variety of different ways. You heard me mention that we have a museum and archive center on the University of New Mexico campus in Albuquerque. There we have a curator and an archivist, and those folks are always busy helping to support the parks, even though they might not always be on the park landscape. And the work that the curator has been doing this year is that new laws were established where private museums and institutions needed to be able to document where their objects had come from. They needed to reach out to the institutions or to the organizations, such as the National Park Service, where they believe those objects might have come from. And so our curator, they vetted over 25 of these requests from institutions across the country on potential materials that those institutions held that might have come from Aztec and Chaco. And there were over 2,000 objects where we received letters that said, "We think we have something that belongs to you." And literally on the image or in the letter, it says, "We believe that it was collected from Aztec ruins or from Aztec West or from Pueblo Bonito." And then the curator's job became like a detective, trying to figure out, like, okay, well, who collected this object? When did they collect this object? How do we know that it came from this landscape? And so within all of that, over 2,000 of them had to be vetted very particularly to figure out, like, is this appropriate for for us to potentially accept it back. Like, how do we really determine next steps with that? And that's still a process that we're working through. But know that, it's not always simple. It's not always black and white where these objects came from and the history of these objects. So we have to be very mindful and smart, and at times work with our tribes and pueblos to really figure out the provenience of these different objects and materials. So our team has been working tirelessly to make sure that those objects return to where they need to be, or go to where they need to be. And that includes the archivist taking a look at the over 100 years of documents that we have here at these parks to really truth test those different objects and materials that have been scattered across the country. So I just wanted to really celebrate the work that they do. We don't often think of them, it's a museum, an archive center that's far away from the park, but the work that they do to help protect these objects in these places and really support the National Park Service is just top notch, and they really stay busy. In addition to that, we spend a fair amount of time working with our tribes and pueblos as we vet the projects that you just heard me talk about. We meet with our partners once a year. We talk about ideas about things that we want to work on, and they tell us the ideas that they think that we should work on as well. So we work collaboratively to make sure that their needs are met, and make sure that the park's materials are taken care of over time. And so those are some of the big things that we did for 2025. And as we pivot into 2026, some of those same things are part of our to-do list. And then there is more, of course. There's always more to do when it comes to managing a national park. And as we look at the priorities such as preservation, environmental stewardship, and infrastructure, we will move into the construction of the housing project, which is the largest construction project that we've ever had at Chaco Culture National Historical Park in its history. We're hoping to get that finished in the next few years. We also have an interim exhibit project to happen out at Chaco Culture as well. So if you've been to Chaco before, you know that there's an exhibit space that's currently without finished exhibits or objects on display. And I could talk for hours on why that is not the case. And we're working through getting that space fixed. But in the meantime, we decided, why not put together an exhibit space so that we can showcase the culture of this place and really celebrate the people through time. And so this idea of an interim exhibit was developed. And that will be finished and hopefully in by winter of 2026. So we hope to welcome you all back to Chaco Culture so that you can see the exhibits that are going to be finished there. We took some of the materials from the exhibit space and are going to move them out. And then we're going to create some additional displays and have some objects there for folks to be able to engage with. So we're super excited about that. We also have, wait, let me get my bearings. Within that exhibit project, we're going to be working on the foundations of that building, but those project monies aren't going to come until later. So that's the reason why we've decided to move forward with this exhibit project today. We want to make sure that when visitors come to the park, they have something to connect them with the place and give them some perspective. And this will help to do that. In addition, we have 26 federally recognized tribes that come to these places regularly, and we want to make sure that they have a place to celebrate their culture. And so we've really worked hard to work with those communities to make sure that this demonstrates the culture that they want to celebrate. So we're stoked about that. One of the projects, again, construction that we have happening in the parks is going to happen at Aztec Ruins. We're finishing up the planning process for that, and that will include a new park headquarters for Aztec Ruins National Monument, which is located up north in Aztec. And if you've been to Aztec before, you know that originally the National Monument was just the Great House sites themselves. And then over time, the National Park Service were able to secure these extra parcels of land. And within being able to purchase those extra parcels of land came structures on them, but not always the most appropriate structures for a park headquarters. So we've gone through the planning process over the last couple of years, and we landed on removing some temporary structures that really had very low use and value, so that we could in turn remove 3 buildings and have 1 headquarters. And so that's what we'll be moving forward, hopefully into construction by 2027. The next topic that I wanted to talk about is really kind of this effectively managing our lands and waters and expanding outdoor access for the benefit and enjoyment of people, and really celebrating great natural playgrounds. And that includes making sure that we are celebrating the visitor experience with trails work. And within that, you heard me talk about Pueblo del Arroyo and the new infrastructure that we hope to add in there. We also have a trails project to really revisit the South Gap Trail to make sure that we're replacing those culverts and making that a safer, more enjoyable experience for visitors. And then the other project on the horizon, again, back to LIDAR, is to take the back wall of Pueblo del Arroyo that has those structures on the back that kind of look like they help hold up that back wall, but were installed in the mid-1980s. And we're going to do a project with the region to actually LIDAR that whole back wall. And we're really excited about that. So again, the equipment that the Chaco Culture Conservancy purchased for us several years ago now is going to be put to work. That thing is a workhorse. And we're going to start to track that back wall to determine what we want to do for next steps in preservation. But more to come on that one. That's just in its infancy. And then the next one is really back to that idea of upholding, our tribal trust responsibility, supporting stewardship of resources, and creating those economic opportunities for our tribal partners. And that one is really celebrating this Aztec Black pottery project, which has occurred through both 2025 and is moving into 2026. The Aztec Black pottery project is a project that's done between the National Park Service, a private researcher, and one of the Pueblos, though we have consulted with all the Pueblos on this specific project. And it really came into clarity as most projects do, right? Like, you're working on something else, a bunch of folks get together and start talking, and then people recognize that maybe there's something more to what they're doing. So there was a project happening at Aztec Ruins, 2009 to 2011, where we were doing some backfilling of Aztec West. If you're not familiar with backfilling, that's the idea that at one point in time, a lot of the structures were uncovered, but anytime you expose walls that are thousands of years old, they're really hard to maintain. And so there was a decision made like, hey, let's backfill some of these walls just so we can maintain the integrity of the structure. During that project, some extra pieces were discovered, and we really started to look at the spatialness of what's called Aztec Black pottery. And looking at, it's a very unique type of pottery. It doesn't happen in very many places. It seems to be mostly in Aztec West, but where our archaeologists and researchers began to look at that site, they could see that those pots and those pieces were found in specific locations. And that made them start asking questions. That's the wonder of working in national parks, is like, they're great places to learn and explore and examine. And this is just one of those special opportunities where folks have been able to do that. So they continue these conversations like, what do you think that's about? They talk with other folks, and they think that, perhaps they'd like to dig a little deeper into how these pieces fit on the landscape, working with tribes to figure out, might these be of special importance, and just dig into why these are where these are. And that leads us to today. And so these folks got together, they put together some grants. They were given some funding by WNPA, which is now WNP, which is the Western National Parks Association. They received a grant from them, and they received funds from the Chaco Culture Conservancy. And then one of the legs of this stool, in partnership of amazingly smart researchers, is our National Park Service archaeologist. And so they cobbled together the funds to be able to do some research. And that's where we're at today. And so we have, there's a tribal member, there's a private researcher, and then there's the National Park Service who are working on this research. And two out of those three just went to the American Museum of Natural History because that institution happens to have a bunch of this pottery. What they learned, it happened a few weeks ago, and what they learned was, what was marked as Aztec black pottery might not be Aztec black pottery, but they needed to get their eyes on the situation to be able to learn that. And they're learning that this material is actually more rare than what they thought. So now the researchers have come back together. They're actually meeting at Aztec ruins next week, to look at the materials that we have at Aztec specifically, to again continue to dig in and to figure out what they think this means. Of course, always in consultation with the tribes and the pueblos to make sure that we are in alignment with what is appropriate. So they had to put together research projects, they had to go through appropriate vetting, and they've worked really hard to get where they're at today, but continuing to ask curious questions to try to find answers that, may not always be answerable. But this is the work that we do as the National Park Service and as stewards of this amazing landscape. And so those are the biggest things on the horizon, that might be a little different and new than what you're used to hearing about things in our national parks, specifically Aztec Ruins and Chaco Culture National Historical Park. We always have interpretive programs that are being offered. We always have the day-to-day routines of managing a campground, and making sure that all the janitorial is done. But these are some of the more unique projects that are happening behind the scenes that I thought you would be interested in learning about today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm back.
Okay, I'm getting a
I was
drink.
all right. Yes, let the vocal cords rest. I have some questions for you. Let me get my list up, and we got some audience questions as well. So, are you ready, Denise?
I don't know.
All right, I am gonna throw some good ones at you.
Okay.
Okay, and yeah, that was great. I have questions to follow up with you about after this too. Now, so okay. So first off, you stated that both at Chaco and Aztec are going strong. What and you shared some of this. Obviously, we have a lot going on. We're very busy. There's some really exciting things coming up, and some really cool projects that have wrapped up or are just about wrapping up. But what does strong really look like on the ground right now, in comparison to years past, or just in general? What gives you that strong feeling?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I would say that I've been in the parks for a bit of time now. I feel strong, as it relates to understanding the resource, understanding what we need, understanding what our partners need, and understanding what the staff needs. And I think that we've had a good amount of time, to work as a team to really determine what are the best next steps. You also heard me say that things like the exhibit project and the building itself, that project is further out. So the National Park Service, like our budgets we have a base budget, but if we want to do other things, we apply for project funds. And those project funds by design are anywhere from 5 years plus out, depending on the size of the project. Since I've been here for more than 7 years, we've really been able to build a good foundation of projects moving forward. And so, what that means is there is constant money that's coming in so that we can continue to move things forward. And sometimes there's a gap in that. If you don't have a strong team who's building those projects, who keeps things moving forward, then there becomes a gap in time where, yeah, we can start putting the projects in the hopper, but we're not going to see those projects come to fruition for another 5 years. But we have a great legacy and history of continuing that process. And so we have the projects that are coming, the funds are coming for us to be able to accomplish those things. And in addition to that, we have built relationships with those funders so that they know their funds are good with us. Like they can give these parks money and we will finish the project. And that's based on relationships and trust that we have with other individuals in the National Park Service. I also feel strong because, like, the foundations of these stone structures are strong. The ancestral Pueblo people were amazing builders, and I am so humbled to be able to protect those spaces that they built. But they built some strong structures thousands of years ago, and so I think that that really that sets me up for success and us up for success because we have such good things to start with. We have good community relationships, we have good connections, we have all of that at our fingertips. And so I think that is a great launching off point. Don't get me wrong, not every day is simple and easy. And I don't feel strong every day. But right now, I feel good about what the future has to hold for our parks. I feel like we are cared for. I feel like we are supported. And I feel like we are on an amazing trajectory moving forward.
All right. Excellent. Now, here's a question from the audience. Any surprises when you were doing the or overseeing the LiDAR project at Pueblo del Arroyo? Anything that came out of that that you weren't expecting?
Oh my gosh, I'm sure if we asked the archaeologists, they would have like secret squirrel stuff, right? I think for me, what I found to be the most surprising is that they could somewhat track like who was doing what preservation work when, and that just blows me away. I know that with working with the preservation team, because I've spent some time out in the field doing rock and mortar work, also humbling. Um, like they can tell who the builders were. They can tell not who the specific person was, but the style of that builder. And I think it's such an intimate relationship that you have. And I think that through doing this LiDAR setting, that was also that intimate connection. And now we have this precise data that I think will really serve us into the future. But as I looked at this specific report, because I did read the report, and I didn't see any major surprises, but I bet if you asked the person who did the work, they would have surprises. Sorry.
Yes. No, no, I think that's a great answer because it's a good segue into me saying, behind the scenes, Denise and I talked about how much we should get into LiDAR during this talk because it's really cool, and I know you all want to hear
Totally
more
cool.
about it. But the reason why we didn't go into it too much is because it really needs its own lecture, I think. So stay tuned because that's coming. I just have to get a good speaker and time set up. So more LiDAR coming. Okay, so next question for you. So can you kind of tell us a little bit more about, well, we'll stick with the LiDAR. I have some questions that I want to dig into that a little bit more. Um, why particularly, and you got into a little bit of this with just kind of guiding the preservation, but Why do you think that this is such an important stepping stone or guide for future potential research?
Um, so two things. I'll answer the question specifically to why Pueblo del Arroyo, and then I'll answer regarding like general research. So the first part is it's it's sensitive. It's right next to the wash, and potentially we can keep manipulating that river, but I just don't know if it's gonna hold. There are huge stone gabions in the wash where managers have tried to divert that river over time. And so the reason why Pueblo del Arroyo was chosen as the priority project is because we can't guarantee it will be there for forever. And so with that, this provides that like down to the centimeter precision on what that site looked like or looks like currently. And so that it was the first reason regarding that specific great house. More generally, LIDAR provides somewhat of a light on the landscape material. In the National Park Service today, we don't do a lot of excavations because what we understand from our tribal partners is that that's inappropriate. And so with that, these other kinds of research within Chaco Culture National Historical Park, part of our legacy or part of our legislation is research. And so and that's not for all national parks, but definitely for these parks. And so research is really important, and we want people to continue to research these landscapes. That's how we learn. But with that, our expectation is that we're lighter on the landscape. How can we learn without being destructive? And so LIDAR provides that opportunity and provides that sense of learning. It doesn't have to actually be in the field. That material could be utilized by any researcher around the world, and they wouldn't actually have to come to the park. We want them to come, don't get me wrong, but it has a great portability to it as well. So I think for those reasons, both specifically for Pueblo del Arroyo and for general research, that's the reason why it's a great tool.
Wonderful. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, going back to kind of talking about archives and objects and um, looking at things like with the Black Pottery Project and having things analyzed, um, is it safe to send things to the National Museum at this time?
I don't know. I can't answer that question
Okay,
for the National Museum. I have no idea what their protocols are.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another question. For those keen on visiting Chaco and getting insights from the indigenous people and communities, what are your what do you recommend? What is your experience for someone who's never been to Chaco before, wants to experience the parks? Um, you know, where do they start if they're coming from afar?
Oh my
Any
gosh, where to start?
other than your website and our website, of course, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like whoever answered the question is looking for some level of an indigenous experience or somehow that level of connection. Every visitor who comes to the park, I think, is looking for something a little bit different. I think that type of experience might be different than somebody who's coming with, their 7-year-old twin boys who just want to look at dinosaur bones, which we do have, good petrified things in the park. So something for everybody, right? But I think if you're looking at that quintessential indigenous experience or that indigenous connection, do a little research in that area. Especially for here in New Mexico, we have several different tribes and we have Pueblo communities. So, and all of those different communities used the park in different ways and in different times. And so that's worth kind of digging into to figure out what kind of connection you're looking at. You can also visit other places like Acoma. They have a great museum and a place where you can visit part of the historical community there if you're looking for that level of connection. And specific to New Mexico, I think it's New Mexico, there's a place where you can actually go and there's a list of appropriate, like how do you visit appropriately? And for different communities, there are different protocols on how you do that respectfully. I think one of the things that I try to remember and was definitely eyes wide open when I arrived here is that every tribe and pueblo is so very different. And it's important to practice a level of humility when it comes to learning from those tribes and pueblos. And so, it's not a one-stop shop. It's everybody is a little bit different, and being open and humble and listening is a great place to start. And you might find your own, emotional and intellectual connections with the place that may or may not align with different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I hear over and over again. It's just that connection. People feel the Chaco, whether they have a historic connection or,
Yeah,
just coming from someplace far away and have no connection at all. It's one of
it's
those
magical.
places.
It
It
is
is.
magical.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going through my notes here. We talked about the Chaco housing project. I'm just trying to get one more question out of you before we wrap up because we have time
You can get
for
one or
one
two more
more.
questions out of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, this is a hard one. I don't know. Looking ahead to 2026, what project are you most excited about? I'm skipping to that one. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
What am I most excited about? Gosh, most is a big word, B. What am I
I
most
know.
excited about?
We won't hold you to it if you want to change your mind.
Um, for me, I think I thought of a different one. For me, the Aztec black pottery is the one I am most excited about. And for a couple of reasons, like you mentioned earlier that I studied art. I studied ceramics, but not ceramics like this. This is like off the chart ceramics. And I'm excited that we're digging into some critical research and we're doing it in a collaborative way, and we're doing it eyes wide open and really open um, to different perspectives, especially around Indigenous perspectives. The way in which we learn history in context of Indigenous communities is not written, it's oral histories. And so, really, being able to share what we've learned with the tribes so that they can, if the opportunity arises, share that perspective through their Indigenous knowledge is a very special opportunity for us. And we might be thinking at this point in time that Aztec Black was created by one potter, and I think that for me, that is the most compelling and the most exciting and the most kind of like, I get all tingly when I think about it. I think because like if that's the case, like this is one person's work on the landscape, and I think that people have this idea that national parks have it all figured out and like they already know this stuff and it's so done. And then we learn things like this. Like there's just so much that we don't know, and these are a great place of learning. So that's my favorite one.
Yeah, that is working to be my favorite one too. So if you're excited about the black pottery, I will let you all know I'm going out there next week with the researchers and I'm hoping to get some good pictures and maybe a few little snippets of information that I'll share with you all on social media or email if I can. So keep an eye on that in
Yeah,
the next couple of
they
weeks.
have a really good plan. And so, yeah, if you want to take a quick trip out to Aztec next week, I think it's 3 days next week, but I can't. Is it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? I can't remember the
Wednesday morning is
Wednesday.
when Lori said she'll have
There's
everything set up.
okay. So what they're going to do is we have limited space at Aztec, so they're taking a part of the visitor center and they're kind of cordoning it off because the researchers need to work. Like they only have a certain amount of time together, and so we're going to have like an information officer that will be kind of at the front, being able to answer folks' questions and kind of be that go-between so that the researchers can focus on the research. But I am just, yeah, I'm really excited. I'm kind of like nerdy excited.
I know. Yeah. Well, we can nerd out. We can nerd out together next week. Okay, so with that, those of you who are here, you've heard it first next week, Aztec Visitor Center. Um, so okay,
Don't
well,
bother them.
don't bother them. Just we'll peek from afar. Okay. I will respect everyone's time, although I have about an hour worth of more questions for you, but some other time, Denise. Thank you so much. I definitely, I think I can speak for everyone here by saying I really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us, share all this information, and certainly your leadership steering the parks through these waters and making sure everything is going strong and we're all able to continue to celebrate these wonderful places. So I hope as well to all of you that this conversation helps shed some light on the work that's happening behind the scenes and maybe what'll be coming to the front of the scenes, like the pottery project next week, and just how much dedication certainly to for Denise and her team at both parks that it takes to keep these places really protected and accessible for all of you and all the visitors each year. So I am going to share if you want to continue to connect with us and want to know what's coming up next. Hopefully you can see this slide here. This is kind of our quick snapshot of ways to connect with us, events that we have coming up. Our mission, as Denise shared, is just to support our park. So this is why we do what we do. So if you want to continue to connect with us next week on Wednesday, less than a week away at 5 p.m. on Zoom, our very first book club discussion talking about Canyon Gardens, Ancient Pueblo Landscapes. We'll have guest host board member John Gihate and our special guest, Dr. Lexon. He was the author of chapter 1 of this book, will be joining us as well. So you can sign up for that on our events page on the Chaco Culture website if you haven't already and want to join us. In the months ahead, I just don't have the dates pinned down quite yet. Everybody's been very busy with the holidays, but I have doctors Carrie Heitman and Steve Lexon, who will be our March and April speakers on Zoom. Both of them are not local, so those will both be on Zoom. And I am just working, we talked about the University of New Mexico archives. I am working with Cynthia Wiley, who is the UNM Archives curator and archaeologist, to do a book club discussion about a book most likely about objects and all of the ins and outs of managing a collection like she does. So we are just letting her decide which book she wants to choose. She has so many options. So just follow along on our socials. If you want to learn more about that, check out our events page. You can follow our newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website. Many, many ways to connect with us: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I am not on TikTok. I don't plan to, so follow us on one of those. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not mention our parks need us now more than ever. And I just want to say again, I know that you all share the sentiment of how extraordinary Chaco and Aztec are. They don't take care of themselves, though, and this behind the scenes work is pretty tremendous for our parks. Federal resources are very thin right now, and as the official nonprofit partner to these parks, we're really trying to kind of step up to fill in any gaps that the parks might need. So, Any donations that you make to the Conservancy directly support our parks, and you can donate through the link here on the slide or through the QR code. And any amount helps our parks. So, with that, I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight, for caring about our parks, and just for being a part of our community. We hope to see you again very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, B.
Thank you. Bye bye, everybody.